Welcome to Talking with Tatchell. This week we're discussing the situation in Uganda. Uganda is, in November, going to host the Commonwealth Summit. And the question many people are asking in Uganda is President Yoweri Museveni's government a fit and proper government to host this summit, given the deteriorating human rights situation in that country? I think we all know that there were steps made towards democracy, but that in recent years those efforts have begun to slide backwards, and more people are talking about Uganda going the same way as Zimbabwe, a despotic tyranny where human rights abuses are routine. With me in the studio to discuss this are three Ugandan political activists from the main opposition party, the Forum for Democratic Change. I'm very pleased to welcome Desmond Nzaana, Rosemary Buzabalyawo, and Michael Senyonjo.
Hello, Peter.
I'd like to start by asking you for perhaps to just give us an overview about the current situation in terms of the fragmentation of democracy and human rights within the country, and just give us a sense of why you feel that there are good reasons as to why Uganda should not be hosting the Commonwealth Summit this November.
Thank you very much, Peter. First of all, Uganda is a country, as many people in the world might know, that has suffered so much. We've gone through the situation of Idi Amin and the Obote regime, which were not very good regimes, and under which our people suffered greatly. And there was initially a lot of hope when the Museveni regime, the current regime, took power, all the way back in 1986. That's now 21 years ago. And we hoped that Uganda would begin to take steps towards the positive direction and never go back to the wanton abuse of human rights by governments. But unfortunately, as this regime has grown older, it has just become like the old regimes it removed. And the political rights, the civil rights of the people are trampled, and nobody can do anything about it. The courts are trying, the civil societies are trying, but the government is just suppressing everyone. And we do not think that in a situation like that, the nations of the world under the Commonwealth Summit should be going to Uganda as if all is okay. We would prefer that they use this opportunity to highlight the fact that democracy in Uganda is not functional, and that the development that we are having is not towards a better situation but a worse situation. And they should first insist on reforms to take place before they go there, not after.
Is there any lobbying that's going on, say, with the Commonwealth Secretariat to try and press the Commonwealth to insist on some minimum standards before the summit goes ahead?
Absolutely. The Commonwealth itself, the observers were there during the last general elections. They made quite many good recommendations, and that included making sure that elections are free and fair, making sure that there is no militarization of the electoral process, making sure that the Uganda police force is not militarized, make sure that people have a free will to register. They made concern of the number of people who were just de-enfranchised. And so the Commonwealth itself made good recommendations. What they are doing is to make sure that there is steps to rectify those problems before they go to Uganda. Instead, they seem to be more concerned about how many sumptuous presidential suites are in the city, rather than making sure that there is civil liberties in the country where we're going. Because at the end of the day, when the delegates have left Kampala. Ugandans will continue to look for their loved ones in ungazetted detention centers. Police will continue with its brutality. A lot of human rights issues will be still the same. In fact, if I may go back to your question, Uganda shouldn't be in the Commonwealth in the first place, given the current situations. You got all the similarities, same as Zimbabwe, that caused Zimbabwe to be expelled from the Commonwealth. They are prevailing in Uganda today. So that is the reason why Uganda is not fit to hold the Commonwealth Conference. It shouldn't be there in the first place.
I mean, the problem is, of course, taking on board your view that Uganda shouldn't be a part of the Commonwealth given its human rights abuses and its lack of conformity to minimum democratic standards. The fact that it is, what's your view about what can be done between now and November? Because expulsion doesn't look likely. As you say, the Commonwealth has already said that these are the minimum changes required to make Uganda fit for a democratic and humanitarian rule of law.
Right.
But the government seems to be ignoring it. So what would you say needs to be done now?
I mean, first of all, I think that the general public should be given a chance to express their views or to express themselves. They've tried through numerous demonstrations, but for one reason or another, these are never successful because there's always intimidation through deployment of the army. There's always tear gas even before the demonstrations start. So there's no public expression at all. So there's a lot of oppression through the public addressing or issues or expressing their wishes. I think that's one of the things that really needs to be addressed. The public needs to be able to express themselves either through the media, either through demonstration, or any other form of activity that they can express their wishes.
Can you see that happening in the current climate? Given the scale of repression, it's very difficult, from what you're saying, to envisage how the people of Uganda themselves can change this regime.
It's not going to happen before the Commonwealth Summit. But what is very disappointing for us is that even as the officials of the Commonwealth have gone to Uganda, they have been more interested in finding out whether the facilities are in place for the meeting to be held. Nobody seems to be interested in focusing on the human rights situation, on the very credibility of the government to host a meeting of this nature. Because the Commonwealth, as a club of nations, has standards, it has principles that it upholds. And clearly Uganda is falling short on almost every count. The elections which were held last year were rigged, and there was a court case by our party, and the judges agreed that there were massive irregularities. Although they did not annul the election victory of the president, but they admitted that a lot of things had gone wrong, and those things have not been corrected. As we talk, we have people that are in detention who have either not been tried, and when they have been tried and they have been given bail, government has ignored it, and the courts have given judgments and said let these people go free, and government has refused, to an extent that the parliament, the opposition members of parliament 2 days ago walked out of parliament in protest to that situation. And all these things happen, and it shocks us that the international community and members of the Commonwealth do not raise a voice and ask the Ugandan government whether that is normal and whether that is acceptable for a government that wants to host the Commonwealth meeting.
I mean, how many people do you think are in unlawful detention? How many political prisoners or people detained without trial? Do we have any idea?
Unfortunately, nobody would know the number.
I do have an idea. There is 19,000 prisoners in just jails without any hearing of any form.
And are most of these political prisoners, or?
The most prominent ones are there is about 22 political prisoners in Uganda today.
And who are the rest then? Who are the other?
They just people on petty crimes. They're just dumped in prisons and not tried.
You mentioned ungazetted prisons and torture centres. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, there is the state in Uganda has found a successful way of going around official public prisons. So because they know that there is a lot of bureaucracy involved in putting someone in prison, so what they do, they send state agents at night. They come and take you to an ungazetted detention center. No one knows where you are. No one starting to look. Your relatives can't start looking for you because every police station will say we don't have him or her, and that has been happening again and again and again. The issue came up in the Ugandan parliament. Of course, the ruling party defeated the motion and said that there are channels to sort out those kind of problems. But since the vote, they haven't taken any steps to sort the issue of ungazetted detention centers. And these are the issues we want the international community, the Commonwealth, to point out. They should be able to say this is not acceptable. This is against the Harare Declaration. And if they go today, many Ugandans see the conference as the only obstacle between total dictatorship and the constitutional dictatorship we have at the moment. Because as soon as the delegates have left Kampala, the little holdback the government has now will be, they will just go into full force dictatorship. It is very important that these issues are addressed before the conference.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the conditions in the prison? Because, of course, there's been a number of human rights reports which talk about the widespread use of torture against people who are detained without trial for long, long periods.
Right.
Do you want us to give some examples of what kinds of tortures go on? And
Yeah, but, we have a human rights desk. Our party has got a human rights desk that receives complaints from the public and people who get affected by these criminal habits of the government. And the stories that we get are horrifying, to say the least. People are tortured with all sorts of instruments, and I mean, in the first place, people are taken without any official notice to anybody. Somebody is just grabbed from somewhere, and the relatives have no idea where the person has gone, and they are taken to these places, and by the time they come out, the torture marks they have, the wounds they have, the stories they tell, it's horrifying. And that is why the government, of course, uses ungazetted places, because it would not be very easy to hide things of that nature in a normal prison. So anyone whose problem with the government is of a political nature, if you are seen as a threat to their holding power, you'll end up in one of those places, and that's what could happen to you.
Like Mr. Sentongo, right? What happened to him? He's got quite...
who was he?
One of the opposition activists is Mr. Sentongo. He's got many marks on his back. He was tortured using hot flat irons in the back, and his back is quite scary, right? And this man actually escaped from the detention center, which was just in the neighborhood of the Danish embassy. When he escaped, he found himself in the Danish embassy.
I mean, there's also reports of people, prisoners being killed or dying whilst in prison. The most recent, not recent, but the death of Robin Akinji, the main suspect was, mysteriously died in prison. And you get cases like that where people die in prison.
Was that Pete Alan Barige?
No, there was, yes, there was. And then there was another case of a young man from Kampala who was arrested because they said the family was connected to one of the assumed PRA leaders. There is an organization called PRA, which the government has said it exists and that is fighting the government. It has never shot anybody, it has never attacked any place, but they keep arresting people and detaining them that they are connected to that PRA.
What does the PRA stand for?
They say it's what is it? People's Revolutionary Army.
Yeah, something like that.
But it has never attacked even a police station. I mean, the public has no awareness about it, except from the claim of the government that it does exist. And even the political prisoners we are talking about, the majority of them were arrested on allegation that they are members of PRA, including our party president. And there was a young man from Kabale who was arrested with his father, and they beat him and he died.
I've also heard from my own human rights work of cases of widespread rape of both male and female prisoners in some of the detention centres.
That's right.
You know, here I've been helping a Ugandan refugee who was multiply raped with instruments, with like broom handles and corn cobs. And it does seem that the regime, first of all, is hell-bent on humiliation. There's no due process of law, no form of redress, even when the courts issue judgments, that nothing actually gets done.
Exactly. But let's not forget that this is the same government which has presided over the worst humanitarian catastrophe in northern Uganda. For 20 years, 1.5 million people were banded together and put in 200 concentration camps with very poor sanitation, with very poor access to anything you can think of as basic human requirements. And it wasn't until former Under-Secretary of State Mr. Jan Egeland came to the camps that this issue came to light, that there is a catastrophe in northern Uganda where 1,000 people were dying every week in the camps, where the rate of HIV infection ballooned from almost zero in northern Uganda to 60% of the population being HIV positive. Infant mortality in the camps was 10 times than the national average. So, and this is just unfolding, and as we think that the situation in northern Uganda is receding, our government has turned into Karamoja region, where they've decided to use forceful means to resettle people of Karamoja, and they've really these mass killings in that region. But what should concern the international community is that there is press laws that gag the press from reporting on such issues, so they don't come out. And that is what we want the Commonwealth to address. There is an era of a strong man in Uganda, and Ugandans are incapable of making the strong man act in their favor. Strong men don't go. They simply go on and on and on, and it's the small people, the ordinary people who suffer.
Yeah. I wonder if I could just move the discussion back to the issue of the elections, because I understand, Rosemary, that you were there during the elections, the last elections, and they were quite widely reported in many countries around the world that they fell very well short of international standards of free and open elections. Do you want to tell us a little bit about, just set the scene about what happened to the opposition leader and the general vote rigging process that went on?
Right. From what I witnessed and what the stories I heard on the public transport system in Kampala during and after the elections, there was a lot of people who initially there was a lot of demoralization because the opposition leader had been imprisoned, so he was actually campaigning from behind bars and going to court and back into prison. So the general mood. This is Kizza Besigye,
the leader of the Forum, your party, the Forum for Democratic Change.
Yes.
Who was arrested and charged or put in prison on false charges of treason and rape.
Exactly. So the general mood in the public mood was very, very low until he was released just before the elections. There was a lot of people who, on getting to the polling stations, found that their names were not, although they had registered, their names did not appear on the voters' register, so they could not vote. There was a lot of, people who had been bribed prior to the during the campaigns in a lot of them in villages, with a mere bar of soap or a can of cooking oil to vote for the leading party. I mean, these are people who are really, 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 really poor, and anything. Even a lot of them have never seen say a 100 shilling note. All they can count in is coins, so they're very easily bored. There was a lot of reports on people not being allowed to witness the counting of the votes after the election. I remember it rained very heavily during the day on the morning of the elections, and a lot of the polling stations were outdoors. So when it rained, everything had to be rushed indoors, and then when the sun came out, they had to rush everything. Bring everything, restation all the props as they were. So this just left room for anything. I mean, the whole process. Anybody could have tampered with the instruments or the material that were used during the voting process. Yeah. So there was a lot of loopholes during the whole process. There's information. People were not educated enough on the voting process. There's 70% of the population live in rural areas. A lot of them cannot read. A lot of them cannot write. So there wasn't education through the media or any other method to educate the people on what the voting process was. And it's complicated enough even for you and me. I mean, we do vote in this country, but then you have to know which box to tick and which candidate to tick for. So a lot of issues, were quite obvious that no care had been taken in educating the general public as to how to go about with the voting process.
I was wondering if perhaps just in these closing minutes, perhaps look at what the Forum for Democratic Change is proposing. I mean, could perhaps you sum up the basic agenda, what you're campaigning for?
Yeah, just to wrap up, the biggest problem we have in Uganda is the involvement of the state organs into the election process on the side of the government. The army and the police are not neutral. In fact, during the election, in 2 places, the army an army person killed 2 people in a place called Bulange, near the Kabaka, the King of Uganda's seat, when our president was addressing a rally there. And then the police killed a person in another rally in a place called Jinja. And they were all acting against the rallies and the gatherings of the opposition in order to try and intimidate people. Honestly, if you kill 2 people, how many people are going to be scared to turn away from opposition rallies? You can't measure, you can't quantify the effect of such an action. What we have said and what we have been asking the international community to help us in doing is to tell the Ugandan government that the institutions of government, like the police and the army, must be made national in character to serve the whole community, not just the regime and the interests of one man. We have been saying that the Electoral Commission is not neutral, and that the opposition in Parliament should participate in determining who gets appointed to the Electoral Commission. As it is, all the members of the Electoral Commission are appointed by Museveni, and they can be removed by him. And obviously, they act in his interest. And that is to say the really fundamental issues. Under that, there are many other practical issues of money. For example, the opposition groups not having equal facilitation as those who are in government, because the government is having access to money that belongs to the people and using it for political purposes. And then they are even trying to make it impossible for the opposition to fundraise. If we organize a fundraising function and we want to solicit money from our supporters, they will disperse it. They will bring the police with tear gas and they will remove it. So we really think that the whole system needs to be reformed. We need to have institutions which are pro-people, not pro-government. And we need to have an electoral commission which is serious and which serves the community, not the regime.
Can I ask you, I've been quite impressed that the FDC seems very strong on women's rights, and as we know, the empowerment of women is often the key to development in many African countries. Do you want to explain a little bit about the FDC's policies towards women and involving more women in the political process?
FDC policy has is very gender sensitive, and we do encourage women to actively participate in decision making roles, get involved in politics. I mean, it's not because they're women that they'd have to have something to contribute, but the party does welcome any contribution from both genders, but especially
am I right? Haven't you got
our constitution,
you're aiming for a quota?
Our constitution requires that on every committee we must have 40% women, and we tried, and there's no other party in the country that has such a high percentage allocated to women. And we have so many women of high caliber who have been feeling it, meaning that the government not involving women in many places is not for lack of women that can do it. It is simply because they haven't been very interested. So our party is at the forefront of encouraging women to participate in the political process.
Given my own history of involvement in the struggle for lesbian and gay human rights, I wonder if you could perhaps explain a little bit about the FTC's policy on discrimination against gays and lesbians.
Yeah, the issue of gay and lesbian communities is quite. These are people who are suppressed at the moment by the current government in Uganda. The Parliament passed a law that denies them basic human rights and incites the public to go against them. I mean, we are living in a modern age. We are the modern. We want to be the modern leaders of Uganda, and our policy, as the FDC, is that we protect the human rights of every Ugandan, regardless of their sexual orientations, their gender, whether they are disabled or not. We are committed to ensure that the human rights of the individual are inborn with each individual. There is no, we are not, we are against any using parliament or legislation to limit those rights in any way whatsoever. If we need to use the constitution or laws to limit the rights of anybody, including people who are gay or lesbians, it should be for the purpose of protecting their rights, not restricting their rights. And that is where we stand.
And what about the situation of trade unions who have also been victimized by the Museveni regime?
Yeah, trade union issues, they've simply been rendered inactive and ineffective. Right. They are undermined by the powerful state machinery. Recently, we had a strike of Makerere University lecturers. They are demanding they are demanding basic payment. It's their right. It's due to them. But the government used tactics like paying off lower-ranked lecturers as against the senior lecturers and broke that. Then we have people who are working in AGOA. They came together to demand better pay because they were living in they were working under very hostile conditions, producing garments for the American market. Instead, the government supported the entrepreneur and got rid of people who are campaigning to get better pay. It's a bad situation.
Okay, well, look, I want to thank you all very much, Michael, Rosemary, and Desmond. It's been very instructive and illuminating to hear about the human rights abuses and lack of democracy in Uganda. I think many people are with you in your struggle for a free and democratic society. And to everyone who's watching, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at the same time next week for Talking with Tatchell.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.